I read about tolerance in society. I'm reading a book. So I want to excuse my reading because I don't know how to pronounce the word so I'll try the best I can. When smokestacks at the paper mill first began churning their waste into the air over the small Midwestern town, the residents complained, and they said, and the arson smell was everywhere. It seeped into the upper hostility of their cars and crept into their homes, and it seemed to flavor their food and water. It settled in the fibers of their clothing, and it penetrated the very pores of their skins. But the odor was the smell of money. The town's father told them repeatedly the offensive stench meant jobs for their sons and husbands and promised prosperity and security. And besides, they said, "You'll get used to it." And they did. After a couple of weeks, the smell was no longer sickening. In a few months, the residents didn't even notice it. A year or two later, citizens thought of the horrible odor only when visitors to the town commented on it. The odorous output of the mill had become so pervasive, it had become unremarkable to those who were most affected by it day after day. And the fate of that town is parable. The fate of that town is a parable of the ideas that have come to the pyramid of our society and impressed themselves upon us from all sides. The tolerance unremittingly inserts itself severely into our lives via television images, and song lyrics. Whether you know it or not, the deceptive doctrine of the new tolerance in the accumbent idolatry effaces it all around you, seeping not only into your mind, but into the minds of your children and other loved ones. And if we are not careful and alert, it will soon become unremarkable and thus irresistible to those who are most endangered by it. The danger zones. In the chapter, we will look at the influences of tolerance in 4 areas: art and literature, entertainment, health, and science. As we do so, we will seek to answer the biblical questions. If the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? Psalms 11:3. What can we do? How can we respond to the recessive influence of the new tolerance in society? And how can we protect our children from its dangers? The microphone. Psalms 11. The foundations of law and order have collapsed. What can the righteous do? So, art and literature. Average citizens and parents in many Western countries have often found themselves shaking their heads in the past few decades at what many in society have come to view as art. Among the most bizarre examples are projects funded in the U.S. by the National Endowment for the Art and NEA. The NEA's tax-funded art displays have included A young woman urinating in the toilet. A photograph of a crucifix in a jar of urine. A 3-foot mound of excrement. And a dismembered sculpture of two women involved in a sexual act. How could anyone label such exhibits art, let alone spend public funds on them? Simple such displays are partly a result of the influence of the new tolerance. Look at it this way. If all beliefs, behaviors, lifestyles, and truth claims are equal, then there is no standard one can use to say that the Mona Lisa is better art than a Robert Mapfre, whoever that name is, photo of a homoerotic act. In fact, to even suggest that a painting or sculpture is a masterpiece is offensive, writes William A. Henry, because it implies that one idea, culture, or human being can actually be better than another. In a society dominated by the new tolerance, any objective definition of what art is becomes impossible. Art becomes whatever the artist or audience says it is. A similar dynamic is at work in the world of literature. Once upon a time, people understood when they read books or articles that they were reading the author's point of view, and the author may have expressed himself poorly or well, but he determined what his words were intended to mean. The reader's job was to grasp the author's meaning. And today, in our society at large, as in our schools and universities, that is often not true, as Jim LaFoe explains. To postmodern thinkers, readers aren't learners standing under the authority of the author in text. They are no longer on a quest to discover what the author and the words of the text mean. Instead, readers are elevated to status of authority over the text. The intent of the author becomes irrelevant. At the same time, though, even the reader isn't an authoritative in any objective or final sense. All reading are equally valid, and all readers are their own authorities. And Tactics added, in other words, in today's society, you may read the diary of Anne Frank and view it as the diary of a Jewish girl hiding from Nazis in the midst of the Holocaust. If I read the same book and conclude that it's an auto maintenance manual, I would be right, and so would you, because according to the new tolerance, what Anne Frank intended to record or communicate is irrelevant. Irrelevant. The book means whatever I say it means, and whatever you say it means. Our claims, our beliefs are equally valid, and this is the best illustrated, perhaps, by the recent release of an exclusive version of the Bible by Oxford University. Press Kenneth Woodward, the religion editor of the Newsweek magazine, comments, readers who find the Bible sexist, racist, elitist, and insensitive to the physically challenged take heart. Oxford University Press' new exclusive language version of the New Testament in Palms has cleaned up God's act. In this version, God is no longer Father and Jesus is no longer Son. And the hierarchical title of Lord is assessed as an archaic way to address God. Nor does God male pronouns for the deity have been abolished through a kingdom. As the editors explain, the word has a blendedly and ironic and patriarchal character. Even God's material right hand has imputed out of their deference to the left hand in some examples. In the majestic open of John's Gospel, the glory he has the Father as the only Son of the Father becomes the glory of a parent, only child, John chapter 1, 14. And the Lord's Prayer now begins like this: Father, Mother, hallowed be your name. May your dominion come. Luke chapter 11:2. And Jesus' own self-understanding as God's only Son is generalized to no one knows the child except the father, mother, and no one knows the father, mother except the child. Matthew chapter 11, verse 27. Avoiding another transitional phrase, the Son of Man, the Oxford text reads, "Then they will see the human one coming in the clouds with great power and glory," Mark chapter 13, verse 26. The editors do not claim that Jesus spoke in gender-neutral language, but they obviously think he should have. And the changes have made are not merely cosmetic. They represent a fundamental reinterpretation of what the New Testament says and how it says it. In the fall of the new tolerance, there is nothing wrong in the slightest with changing the words of the Bible, because the Bible, like any other of literature, has no objective meaning at all. It only means what each individual reader says it means. And so what's a concern Christians do? How can we respond to the new tolerance as it manifests itself in art and literature? The following might suggest some starting points. Reinforce the concept that true art, whether visual or musical or literary, is that which reflects or reinforces whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable. Excellent or praiseworthy. Philippians chapter 4:8. Art then should reflect and glorify, even imperially, for perhaps the nature of God and see art accomplishes the opposite, and non-art does neither. If we encounter suggestions that books or movies or works of art mean whatever the listener, reader, or viewer says they mean, gently and tactfully point out the irony in such a statement. For example, a friend of mine who is a professor at a secular university says he has responded to such concepts by smiling warmly and saying, "So what I hear you saying is that Jesus Christ is Lord." The only way for his listeners to argue consistently is to admit that his statement is true. And if they disagree with his interpretation, that they admit that they intended their words to be understood objectively and is contradicted in their own argument. Help your children understand as early as possible that words have meaning, and the meaning may sometimes be poorly phrased or misunderstood. But if they were devoid of meaning, there would be no point in writing or talking. And this may have been an obvious point to previous generations, but that is no longer true. Don't fall for the lie that says that since we cannot know everything a writer or artist intended to communicate, we cannot know anything about what he or she meant. This is a fallacy offered Dennis McCalvin refutes specifically in relation to the Bible. God has chosen language as his primary medium of revelation, and we believe that we can accurately understand the intent of God's revelation to a some degree. The mission of hermeneutics, the science of interpretation, is to adjust our understanding based on cultural and language differences at the time of writing, so we may know the author intended, meaning this mission has been largely successful. The rumors have swirled since the show's about in 1994, and then when news leaked that the star of the show wanted her character to discover that she was a homosexual, and the rumors fueled a media frenzy by April 1997 when Ellen DeGeneres, DeGeneres' namesake character on her sitcom, Ellen intentionally confessed her homosexuality over an airport PA system. The story was front page news, earning the actress a spate of talk show appearances and news magazine covers. The excitement, of course, was due to the history-making nature of the decision. Ellen would be the first openly gay star of a television show. In retrospect, perhaps the move is far less shocking and revolutionary than it appeared at the time. After all, from the days of the 70s sitcom. Soap television has been central to the rise, fueled by the new tolerance, to gain approval for and participation in a homosexual lifestyle. A drive that has been so successful that as of February 1997, before Ellen's coming out, 22 homosexual characters populated the television airwaves, the Simpsons to Melrose Place. Why such over-presentation of homosexuals on television and in movies? The words of the Judge Robert book suggest one possibility. Hollywood's writers, producers, and executives think popular entertainment affects behavior, and it is not merely that they sell billions of dollars of advertising on television on the premise that they can influence behavior. They also think that the content of the program can reform society. They understand that no single program will change attitudes much, but they rely upon the cumulative impact of years of television indoctrination. It's not just homosexuality that today's entertainment industry promotes in an effort, though not we should reiterate a human conspiracy, you see chapter 5, to reform society. The producers, writers, and performers in the fields of television, film, and music gives asset and impetus to the ideas of the new tolerance. Oliver Stone movies JFK and Nixon are typical of the doctrine of the new tolerance operating in society. Stone apparently felt little allegiance to Fox in his portrayals of Kennedy's assassination and Nixon's downfall because facts are not the point in a society dominated by the new tolerance. And Stone's vision of history is no less valid than historians who may have spent a lifetime chronicling facts. Even the wholesome Disney tradition had become saturated with new tolerance. The animated feature The Lion King is a mesmerizing story that incorporates elements of monism, pantheism, and sorcery with its theme, The Circle of Life. Pocahontas tells the reverence tale of a noble Indian princess who falls in love with a white male, representative of a corrupt, oppressive culture. Take, for example, the pantheism evident in the hit song from Pocahontas, Colors of the Wild. Wow, let's notice that now. And this book is old. This book is probably from what year? I'm not sure, but I think it should say somewhere on the back. I think, yeah, 1998, this book came out. And it's now 2022, and you hear about the Disney stuff. You think you own whatever land you land on. The earth is just a dead thing, and you can claim. But I know every rock and tree and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name. You or your children will probably recognize and reject such pantheistic philosophy if it were present directly, wouldn't you? But when it is present in the lyrics of a song sung by an animated character on a silver screen, in such a way, as Professor David Wells said, film and television now provides the sorts of values that were once provided by the family. The dangerous doctrine of the new tolerance is being slowly inserted into your mind, your children's minds, and into the society that surrounds you. But it is possible to counter the dangers of new tolerance in ways such as the following. First, parents, remember you are in charge of raising your children, not Hollywood. not Madison Avenue, and not the toy companies. No matter how much your children may object, it is your responsibility to say no to toys, music, movies, or other forms of entertainment that undermines or compromise Christian concepts and standards. And one father I know agreed with his teenager son that the boy could buy any music, cassette, or CD without a parental advisory sticker provided. The dad listened to it or read the lyric sheet before the son listened to it. And if the dad approved not only of the language, but of more subdued messages in the music, fine. If not, they would return the cassette or CD to the store. On one occasion, the father and son returned free music cassettes in less than an hour to a mall music store in one afternoon before finding a selection that was acceptable. The dad would always explain his decisions to his son, and while the boy was not always pleased, he soon learned to filter media messages on his own. Don't complain about the problem. Contribute to the solution. A friend of mine works in Hollywood. I once sat across the table from him, carrying on about all that was wrong in movies and television. He stopped me cold. Just once, he said, nearly shaking his finger at me, I wish the Christians who don't like what they see coming out of Hollywood would actually do something about it. I was surprised at his words, but even more surprised at the pain and the weariness that showed on his face. Where are all the other Christian screenwriters and producers and directors? They're not in Hollywood, I can tell you that, because most of the time I feel all alone as a Christian in this industry. His voice often then. If you want to work in a real mission field, he said, come to Hollywood. His words silenced me. His point was well taken. Our society will not be helped by complaining. What it needs is Christians who are willing to enter into relationships with Christians and non-Christians who are influenced by the new tolerance that pervades our society. Learn critical reading, viewing, and listening, and teach it to your children. Learn to understand what is a book, show, song, sing. Evaluate how is the message being presented. Are any bias evident? Are all sides being shown? Is the author's, reporters, or performers' agenda evident? Hidden? How does the message compare with the truth of the scripture and the revelation of God in Christ? Respond. Does my evaluation require me to accept or reject the message? Help your children critically evaluate the media messages that bombard them constantly, and watch television with your children. Pause the videotape of Pocahontas and to ask what the movie is really communicating. When the commercials interrupt their favorite sitcom, help them to understand, evaluate, and respond to what they are watching. Take every opportunity to use society's own messengers to communicate biblical messages. For example, the pastoral scriptural lyrics of many popular songs offer a great opportunity to present biblical answers to spiritual questions. And one teenager I know will occasionally answer the plaintive plea of the song, "Who will save your soul?" by saying, "I know who saves my soul, do you?" Another has used Joanne Osborne's question, "What if God was one of us?" to introduce his friends to the gospel message by reading Philippians chapter 2, 5-11 from his pocket New Testament. And though Fiona Apple may not be singing of God when she testifies, "I need to be redeemed to the one I've sinned against" in her song Criminal, an alert Christian can use that line as a springboard to witness to the truth that we all sin against God, and that there is a Redeemer. Romans chapter 3, verse 23, verse 26. He's been on the cover of Health and Medicine. He's been on the cover of Time magazine, and he has appeared on nearly every morning talk show and even in News magazine. And his books soar to the top of best-selling lists. A popular audio CD of music and meditation bears his name, and his website routinely records over a million hits a month. He's Dr. Andrew Well, author of Spontaneous Healing in 8 Weeks to Optimum Health, and he is one of the most successful practitioners of alternative medicine and New Age remedies, along with Deepak Chopra, Agely Body, Timeless Mind, Marlon Wolfson, The Healing of America, and Bernie Siegel, Peace, Loving, and Healing. Who's Andrew Will? Well, I never heard of him. So you're talking about him. These practitioners and their therapies are rapidly gaining popularity and acceptance, making alternative healthcare a $14 billion industry, and some of their ideas are not so unusual. Eat less fat, they say, exercise regularly, and cut down on stress. But they don't stop there. Chopra, for example, is a practitioner of the Ayurvedic medicine, the traditional medicine of India, which not only involves a balanced diet and herbal supplements, but also incorporates Hindu teachings such as the concept of prana, the life energy that flows through all of us, and practices such as the YAGYAS religious ceremonies that solely help from Hindu gods. In addition, much as transcendental meditation popularized Hindu practices in the 70s. So another practice, fear of touch, has spared Eastern mysticism through the halls of science and medicine. According to Dolores Kruger, one of the experts in the Fear-Built Touch movement, Fear-Built Touch is a healing practice based on the conscious use on the hands to direct or manipulate for fear purposes selected non-physical human energies that activate the physical body. In practice, a healer must become centered before attempting fear-built touch. Centering is an act of self-searching and going with to explore the deeper levels of yourself. The alternative therapies championed by Will Corper, Kruger, and others include the hypnotism, meditation, and channeling, cranial meditation, and psychic healing, among others. Many of these healing methods employ the teachings and terminology of Eastern religions, referring to spiritual orientation and connecting with a higher power. But few of them are supported by empirical evidence. The complaint of Dr. Arnold Rahman, former editor of the New England Journal of Medicine and professor emeritus at Harvard Medical School, about Andrew Will's methodology is often echoed regarding others. Will wants you to believe that you don't need the scientific approach, that you don't need to deem evidence. Irreverent, well-educated people applying irrational elements in our culture, and that's what he is doing. Dr. Reedman's frustration is understandable because the alternative medicine has arisen that prosper largely as a result of the new tolerance in its stepchild, multiculturalism. Dr. Donald O. Matthew, writing in The Depth of Truth, points out that the proponents and practitioners of these alternative medicines not only exploit irrational elements in our culture, they rely on them. Alternative medicine apologists use the postmodern method to establish acceptability of their view, and to be specific, they use three postmodern arguments. Number one, they cast doubt on the findings of biochemical medicine, arguing that it is merely an outgrowth of a Western modernism mentality, which is materialistic, male-dominated, and cold. And they argue that the alternative medicine is the product of the marginalizing or oppressed minority culture in the West, and they claim that criticism about alternative medicine are nothing but power posturing by the medical establishment, which endeavors to preserve its control over medicine, and they seek to replace objective, rational experiential data as the basis for accepting the value of a therapy with a new basis, personal experience. No one doubts that the medical community still has much to learn, and there are certainly forms of treatment waiting to be discovered. But much alternative medicine is dangerous. It is dangerous not only because it mixes commoditized healthcare with Eastern spiritualism, thus inducing many doctors, nurses, students, and patients, perhaps even you or your children, to idolatry, disguised by as medicine. It also poses danger to those who need to proving reliable treatment. A victim of liver disease who rejects conventional treatment for the oral healing properties of milk thistle may be helped. He or she may also be immeasurably harmed in the name of the new tolerance. But while the new tolerance may be more suitable, more cleverly disguised in health and medicine, it is still possible not only to recognize, but also to counter its insidious influence. For example, be alert for keywords or phrases in discussions of health medicine, such as channeling a higher power, spiritual, and psychic, that may indicate the presence of Eastern philosophy and religion. You need to categorically reject all alternative forms of medicine, such as herbal remedies, stress reduction techniques, etc., but don't accept idolatry or occultic practices disguised as medicine. Don't be afraid to ask questions and teach your children to do the same. If your doctor or healthcare practitioner advises techniques or procedures that are unfamiliar to you, ask for documentation of the method, effectiveness, not just anecdotal evidence, and don't hesitate to insist upon a second opinion. And be wary of politics, of power at work, in conventional medicine and alternative medicine. A treatment should not be considered worthwhile simply because it is Eastern rather than Western mythology, or because it is an example of female-dominated nursing instead of a male-dominated medical imperialism, but because it is supported by verifiable data according to the most reliable procedures available. And insist that the religious context in medicine be acknowledged as such as not because religion is necessary and capable with science, it's not, but because medicine should not be used as an enlistment tool for Eastern religions. And don't be fooled into thinking that metal will quickly disappear with snake oil. One survey found that 26.6% of Americans had used a questionable health care treatment. In the age of the new tolerance, perhaps more than ever, let the buyer be aware. Hair up. Not only has the new tolerance transformed healthcare, entertainment, and the arts in our society, it has also affected the study and practice of the sciences. For example, a few years ago, Professor David Arias of the Dallas Baptist University present evidence that some of the differences between man and woman originated in biologically and genetics. His research, however, inflamed campus feminists who persuasively preferred to believe that the feminist dogma, regardless of any evidence to the contrary, scientific or otherwise, that there are no differences between the two sexes other than those imposed by culture and environment. The university's administration, intimidated by the feminists, leveled charges against the professor, Arias, and directed Dean John Jeffrey to investigate. Jeffrey refused the maintaining that Arias was performing legitimate scholarly research and that his rights to due process were being infringed by the university's tactics. Both men were fired. Another scientist named Dean Kenyon, a prominent biologist on the facility of San Francisco State University, recently confronted the effects of the new tolerance. Though he was once a true believer in Darwinism, Kenya had for some time exposed the introductory students to what Chuck Colson calls biologically trade secret, that standard Darwin model of evolution is riddled with problems. Kenyon was not teaching creatism. He was not even advocating this belief in evolution. He was simply pointing out the disturbing pattern of the difficulties in Darwinism theory. Apparently, however, this was too much for the scientists at the university. They accused him of teaching religion and removed him from the classroom. And when he didn't work, the school academic freedom committee and other groups quickly defended Kenyon's academic freedom. Kenyon's college tried another tactic. In other words, of Chuck Colson's University Biologically Department met and voted 27-5 that naturalistic evolution is the only theory admissible in biologically, and that reference to an intelligent cause at the origin of life is strictly unscientific. Colson goes on to exclaim, "What a character of real science!" With this resolution, Cliff science writer Paul Nelson, we have witnessed nothing less than the birth of a new method in science. Why run costly experiments to do science today? All we need is a pen and a sheet of paper. That may seem like an oversimplification, but the point of science in the age of the new tolerance, as in medicine and in history, is not facts but power, and not only power but also experience. Lee Campbell's chair of the Division of Natural Sciences at Ohio Dominion College points out a growing affinity between science and mysticism. Mystical sciences rule traditional science negativity. They believe a more enlightening science is possible. Enlightening science is usually defined as exclusive, holistic, and nurturing of life. Campbell goes on to quote the Fritjof Capra, the best-selling apologist for postmodern mystical science, from Capra's book, The Tale of Psychics. This book aims at proving the image of science by showing that there is an essential harmony between the spirit of Eastern wisdom and Western science. It attempts to suggest that modern psychics go far beyond technology, and that the way or tale of psychics can be a path with a heart, a way of spiritual knowledge and self-realization. In this science or religion, is this science or religion? It is both. It is science in the fraud of the new tolerance, which stimulously and paradoxically includes amorphity for the religion. If the word means traditional Christian views of creation, for example, while incorporating spirituality, though strictly of the Eastern monistic and pantheistic rarities. It also is a science that increasingly denies rationality and objectivity, the real pillars of scientific discovery in favor of non-Western concepts such as institution and self-realization. But what can we do? We can't reasonably expect to counter the influence of so many in the scientific community, can we? We can't erase the damage that has been done, can we? And perhaps not. But that's not the point. King David's words in Psalms 11:3 are as relevant today as they were when he first wrote them. When the foundations are being destroyed, what can the righteous do? If we read the rest of the Psalms, what follows his question is we discover the answer. When the foundations are being destroyed, God is still on the throne. And what can the righteous do? Go on being righteous. How do we do that? Let me suggest just a few starting points that relate to the influence of new tolerance on science. Recognize the relational and emotional needs that make the new tolerance so attractive to those who propagate it and to those who fall for it, and recognize also the relational and emotional needs that the new tolerance creates or aggravates, one of which is addressed by Dennis McCormick in The Depth of Truth. At its core, postmodern culture is profoundly lonely. When people have changed the possibility of a servant-style love for the hollow values of respect and toleration, the result is interpersonal distance, and they become wrapped up in avoiding off-limits statements, avoiding disagreements with another views, and standing up for their own rights. Christians can build real relationships and community. The secular world can only envy. Many postmodernisms have been won to Christ after they beheld a group of Christians sharing the love of Christ with one another. Loneliness is certainly not the only result of the new tolerance, nor is it the only motivation that prompts people to seek answers in the empty promises of the new tolerance. A craving for acceptance is probably a frequent motivation, as it is desire for freedom and respect. If we can recognize the needs that motivate others, beliefs, and behavior, we can then go on to respond more effectively. Encourage Christians who work in the significant field and help them deal with the loneliness and hopelessness that may arise in a field so heavily influenced by postmodernism and atheism. Don't be intimidated. You may feel ill-equipped if you are a non-scientist to discuss the influence of the new tolerance with those in the field. However, reminder that the scientists are people too, and they face the same moral, relational, and spiritual dilemmas you do. And keep in mind that postmodernism in science falls prey to the same error as it does in many other areas. Eternal inconsistency. In other words, they use observation and logical inference to reach the conclusion that observation and logical inference tells us nothing, and they argue in a circle only to defeat themselves. By using the tools of science, they demonstrate that they too believe these tools work.